So I've always been an entrepreneur and interested in where the world's going and kind of seeing if you could solve problems in a different way and provide more value to people. And that has led me through kind of the waves of technology and created quite a number of successful businesses in technology. And today I'm on numerous boards, and I started a fund building on the top of Bitcoin, the ecosystem that's coming, the new rails of commerce that are coming forward. Our model of the world that we've always lived in, we try to attach new information to make our model work instead of rely on what is that new information telling us. Prices fall to the marginal cost of production. As people compete and as prices fall, they reduce margins or they find better ways to solve problems, and prices keep falling. For the same reason, we don't pay for our oxygen that you're breathing right now, and you only pay for oxygen underwater or in space. Prices fall to the marginal cost of production everywhere. So why the calculator app on your phone is free, but it's why the photos on your phone are free. And we used to pay for those things in a different world. So prices fall to the marginal cost of production. You can regulate an industry for a while to slow that down. But eventually, if you do, then what ends up happening is that that advantage moves to another nation and it falls there and then attacks your regulated industry from somewhere else. So over the long term, that's what happens. And technology is moving exponentially on a path to actually make that happen faster. So the rails of everything, if you looked at Chat GPT or if you looked at anything, prices fall to marginal cost of production, and the marginal cost of production is falling immensely everywhere. So it raises two questions. We should be enjoying our time more as we work less and we get more. But our existing financial system has approximately $400 trillion of insolvent debt. And so that insolvent debt, the only way to pay it back is through higher and higher inflation. And so prices move up because if you allow deflation from the existing system, the entire system collapses. And that entire system is the life we measure everything by. So what's happening in Silicon Valley Bank or any bank, this is just all counterparty risk spreading around. It takes approximately 32,000 years paying back a debt at $1 a second to pay back 1 trillion. Yet we have $400 trillion of insolvent debt. So how could productivity that reduces prices and makes the debt more expensive to pay back possibly be congruent with that system? And that's where you see the conflict. People are working harder and harder inside that system, making that system worse. And it's literally based on manipulation of money. All money is information, right? People actually don't want more money. I know that's going to sound crazy to many people listening to this, but you don't want more money. What you want is more of what you think money buys you. And that could be a nicer home. It could be more time with your family. It could be a whole bunch of things on what
more movies on Netflix.
Exactly. It could be whatever you believe money. All it is a piece of paper or digital entry describing that. So a ledger that you know what you have versus what you think you need to provide the life you want. And so if you have manipulation in money, as a byproduct, you have to have manipulation everywhere in society. If you have misinformation in money, you have to have, as a byproduct, misinformation everywhere in society, because it's just, that's all it is. It's information. It doesn't actually matter where the money is manipulated. It matters that the big picture, it's like the P game, right? Or the shell game, right? And the money has to increase. You have to increase the monetary base around the world by essentially diluting currency to stay solvent. And then it forces you to ask, what is inflation? And why do people believe that a productive economy requires inflation? So all inflation is, if you're diluting the currency, is a transfer of wealth from some people to others. So it's a theft in money. So some people get rid of, if you have assets, if you have stock, if you have more houses, those go up in value because they don't get diluted as fast. If you're closer to the money, big businesses, you get it first. And inflation is wage deflation. It's the same thing. It's not two different sides of the coin. So it's just different sides of the coin. So it's wage deflation. So if you have savings or if you have wages, those are getting less valuable. So effectively, we have all around the world an agreement that we believe inflation is required for productive economy because we've always lived in a debt-based society, credit-based society, and we put up with what rate of theft is okay, right? We don't ask, is theft okay? We talk about what rate of theft is okay. So then go to the next question. How could you have regulation protecting your money on top of a system designed to steal it? But that number has to expand just because the fundamentals of what I talked about before, because the technology is moving one way, that number has to expand and it has to grow exponentially to offset. So why I think there's a target of 2% inflation is quite simply this. People don't notice if you walked into their house and stole 2% of their stuff each year. They start to notice once that turns into 10% of their stuff being stolen each year. So remember, they're creating the inflation rate by manipulating money. That takes about 18 months to work through the system. Remember when all the policies, there's not a worry about inflation, then inflation is going to be transitory. Now inflation is going to be. So effectively, you have people walking outside and predicting the weather by looking around them, not understanding that their actions created something that has a time lag. And so now you're on the opposite side of that. And now people are noticing the inflation rate and it's starting to get out of hand. And it's way worse in other countries. US is the dominant currency, it's way worse in other countries. And because everything's pegged to the US. So as they ratchet up interest rates, then you cause a collapse of the system, because unless you have more and more printing of money, there is no way out. We're in a debt trap, right? $400 trillion of debt is already insolvent. If you increase interest rates, the insolvency comes faster, and the counterparty risk. So that bank failing, they have counterparty risk with other banks, and those banks hold mortgages for a whole bunch of people, and that counterparty risk spreads around the world. And it just dominoes across the world. And that's actually why you see today kind of two divergent policies. And you see a breakdown, and people are wondering what's going on because of that breakdown. And they're talking about the events today instead of the second and third order effects of those events. And it has to get worse. So you have the Fed increasing interest rates at the same time they're providing massive liquidity support for all banks all over the world, because if they don't, the whole thing collapses. So you actually have you're going to have more monetary easing, a massive amount of monetary easing. Because if you think about inflation and wage deflation in the US and how many people are starting to rise up against what's happening there, right? It picks the pockets of savers and wage earners in favor of big tech and big government. But if you think it's bad there, go into Africa, because this same system, essentially what it requires is, as their currencies fail, what it means is the US essentially can strip mine them, their labor and materials, for next to nothing. And that's the way the system works. It works today. I wish it didn't, but that's the way. And so for countries that are further away from that money printer, or people that are further away from that money printer, the further you are away from it, the worse you do. It's a design of the system. So in a small country, you're further away. What El Salvador did by going to Bitcoin is stepped outside of that system. It's early still. If you looked at, maybe they're up a little bit on their Bitcoin holdings right now, but what they're way up on is tourism, jobs, a sense of hope from a new system that is emerging there. And I visited, so I know that on the ground, it's a free market system, and there's a lot of entrepreneurs and successful business and capital racing into the country to be able to take advantage of that new system. All deflation is your money buys more goods and services. It's more valuable. Your time is going up. It boggles my mind that people actually believe productivity is going down when they can look all around the things that they're using. Look at this, what we're doing right now, talking to this conversation could reach millions of people, completely productive, and it took this much time. It would have taken an enormous amount of coordination and planning 10 years ago, and it couldn't have touched those people. It's staggering. You know why productivity is down? And you know why productivity is down in Costa Rica? Because you're measuring it through a system that has to take that productivity into higher hands. It's stealing it from you because it's measuring from a so look at your camera. Look at how many photos you take today versus what you took 10 years ago and what you paid. The reason why it looks like it's down is productivity moves to in the new world. Productivity is deflationary. It drives prices down. If you're measuring productivity from a system that has to steal that productivity and transfer it to few people's hands to be able to be effective, then you're measuring from the system that's robbing your productivity. Of course, all of the rails, all of the media that you would listen to on how that system operates, including education, unfortunately, would be enhanced by keeping the system running. We're both sides of an equation.
Yeah.
We're a buyer and a seller. So how could it be on one side of the axes, we want all prices to go up forever in our houses and everything else because they're manipulated, and on the other side, we want more value. It can't work. So because we're both sides of that, but we're caught in this loop that people can't see it because it's an abstraction level above what they normally would look at. Go up and pull up an image of a million. Just go on Google search and pull up an image of a million versus a billion versus a trillion. Look at that image. And because our brains can't understand trillions and how big that is, it's a difference between billions and millions. We can't understand when our money is being diluted at that rate. Outside of that system, if you're looking through that system, you might think Bitcoin's a scam. If you actually understand how that system works, the plumbing level on how that system works, and there is no fix from that system, and you concurrently do the work on the plumbing level of Bitcoin, and it's the only thing on the planet without counterparty risk, then you can actually see that transition. What's happening in Bitcoin is Bitcoin price isn't going up. All prices are falling relative to it forever. What it's doing is actually proving my thesis that prices fall to the marginal cost of production when you can't manipulate the currency. And so what people believe it's going up because they're looking through the manipulation of the system, and it's going up a lot more in Lebanon than it is in the US, or going up a lot more in Argentina than it is going, because again, all of these currencies are pegged to each other and they're all being manipulated at an ever increasing rate to drive inflation, to try to pretend they're solvent, and they're not. And Bitcoin doesn't care. And so it's repricing the entire global system, whether that comes from deflation and a credit collapse or inflation. It's repricing the entire thing. But if you zoom out on what's happening, move your time and energy into Bitcoin, all of this is just noise. It has to happen. It gets worse. And so the only way that I've seen, and that's actually why I started Ego Death Capital, is to start investing my time and energy and money into the new system that's developing. Imagine having your savings in a bank in Lebanon, and the bank's closed, right? And then the next day there's 2 more zeros on your currency and all of your entire labor. But that is going to happen at an increasing rate all
it's
around the world.
It's happening other places here, yeah.
It has to, out of the existing system. Without energy, there's no life, right? So, and there's been a massive innovation and technology development in energy as well. So why are energy prices higher? Yeah, but they're higher all over the world because of exactly what I just said. We've had technology everywhere. So what ends up happening in the US, what effectively happens today is US gets energy for free because they can print it. So you could live in a subsystem that is connected to the bigger system and think you're okay, but you're still into the bigger system. Productivity should flow to society in the form of lower prices. And that means our time, we should work less. Even if you go back to Keynes, right? Who I disagree with strongly on because he missed human nature throughout history. If you could control money for your benefit to somebody else's expense, history proves we will. So that's what he missed. In economic possibilities of our grandchildren, he predicted the average working week around the world in 2020, 3 years ago, would have been 10 hours a week, distributed average around the world. What's happened? Some people are working 80 hours harder and harder and harder on a mouse wheel that's moving further and further of them. And some people are working nothing, rent extracting from those people. That's Absolutely. What the system looks like. It has to be a bigger and bigger divide, has to all the time. So that productivity gain from tech should flow to society in the form of lower prices. And if it isn't, there is nothing else I have to say. If it isn't, it's being captured by someone. And how is it being captured by someone? When things become abundant because of what I talked about, there's no way to create money from it. As it becomes more abundant, the price falls precipitously until it's abundant. Same reason your calculator app on your phone is free. So if you pretend they can go up by creating more monetary units, then the prices of everything just go up according to the monetary units. And if you fix the monetary units, then the prices fall forever. Of everything, of energy, of everything. And they keep on falling forever. It's just a trend of forever falling prices that in industry after industry or thing after thing, they all turn to free over time. I would argue just about everything. Today, you have energy, stranded energy, decentralized energy.
It sounds like the Costa Rican example.
Yeah, and that would be normal everywhere. There's abundant energy. There needs to be a pricing mechanism in the market, which Bitcoin mining provides, to be able to go and find that stranded abundant energy. Mm-hmm. And it's also clean energy.
Yeah. You also have the dirtiest energy coming out of Canada through the sand.
Yeah, and so if you think about these examples, you think, wow, so exactly what you should do, you're not doing, because it's all driven by economic incentives, all by money. And so the money is being manipulated, and money has to create more and more monetary units, which pushes up energy prices. And people think there's not an abundance in energy, and you're trapped in the system, consolidating the problem. A job is required because of a monetary system that forces prices up. And at the same time that the technology is concentrating those gains into few hands away from you. Instead of the AI enabling you, it enslaves you. What you think is happening is, for a very short period of time, you're winning against somebody else losing because you're using it. And you could win inside that game for a very short period of time until yours is taken and captured as well. All intelligence, including ours, is just error correction. So all that's doing at a different, it's constantly correcting errors and getting better and better. And we're contributing to correct the errors. And it's rising to another level. How could that not be productivity on steroids? And how could that not reduce prices everywhere? It's illogical. In my model, if you're on Bitcoin, you're seeing prices fall against everything. So if you have a different model of the world and you're reinforcing, trying to make these things fit into your model, you're going to get really confused. Prices fall to the marginal cost of production, period. So let's just assume we're stuck in this system. We measure by that system, and everybody is stuck in that system, trying to work harder and harder, trying to buy more houses to save in that system, trying to do everything else, and making the system more and more fragile with all of their work. Is there a system that could effectively do this? We are all paying for debt that can't be repaid. All of our time is paying for the debt, $400 trillion that can't be repaid, with our time contributing to that system. We're all doing it. Where you can just choose something that doesn't have counterparty risk and not do it anymore. Let's start at the base level. So first, at the base level, if there was something decentralized and secure that was outside of this existing system, you would expect every attack vector to try to kill that. right? Because there's so much power in money, and the more money you have, the more power you have, and this disrupts it from the bottom up. So Bitcoin essentially chose decentralization and security on a blockchain trilemma. You can only solve two of three sides: decentralization, security, and scalability. What that would look like in that system is if you measured from the greater system that's 10,000 times bigger than Bitcoin, you would say, okay, here's a whole bunch of people have created wealth over in Bitcoin because their money wasn't essentially being eroded. So it looks like it's going up in value, right? And a whole bunch of people are creating wealth there. And it would obviously create a market incentive for a whole bunch of other blockchain and to say, I have a new idea on Bitcoin, right? I have a new Bitcoin. It's better. It's technologically superior. And so how could it be technologically superior? Let's just go through the options. So you had something that was provably more decentralized and more secure every single year, but couldn't scale. Every year, more security against the network, more decentralization against the network. And it's stronger and stronger. Never been a hack on it. Never. Some of the exchanges, yes. Never been a hack on Bitcoin. Every year gets stronger, more secure, more decentralized, but lacks scalability. So in that environment, when it creates that kind of opportunity for early adopters on Bitcoin, it would obviously create a massive adoption for other cryptocurrency. So in that environment, how could you solve the problem differently? You could say, it's just open source code. You could say, I'm going to cut this over. I'm going to create a new one called Dogecoin and make a whole bunch of money there because I have a new form and I have most of it. And because it's open source technology. But by very nature, if it actually had the same utility, decentralized and secure, and less decentralization and secure, it would fail. Now let's deal with a different side of the trilemma. Let's say I wanted to create Ethereum and I said, I'm going to solve scalability, or I want to create Bitcoin Cash. This is all you could, and I'm going to solve scalability through larger blocks, right? Whole bunch of different alternative ideas, right? And so, but I have to, by doing so, I have to sacrifice one of the other sides. I have to sacrifice decentralization or security. Okay. And look at the myriad of 20,000 coins that have sacrificed security, and they all go to zero because they all get hacked, right? So let's focus on the ones that solve security and scalability, but at the expense of decentralization. They centralize. Ethereum being a good example. It's simple tech, right? It's expensive tech. And so let's say you solve scalability and security and you sacrifice decentralization. So now you have a more expensive database, right? A very expensive database because it costs a lot to run. Who would use it? How could you possibly have decentralized finance on top of a centralized blockchain? It's ludicrous. And so just the economic rationale, Amazon's not going to move all of their materials to a more expensive database. If you're going to centralize a database, is a far simpler way to do it. And so that's where most people miss this. I understand why they missed it, because so many people were making so much money and it looked like, oh, wow, I'm inside. But only people that could make money long-term would be the insiders selling to other people before they got them. What ended up happening is Bitcoin couldn't do anything on layer one. There was nothing to do. You just sat there, put your money there, held in self-custody, and there was nothing you could do. But it's a protocol, and it's the base layer of a protocol. And the second layer that is now on top of it is Lightning and Liquid and others. And now it can scale, but it doesn't sacrifice layer one to scale. So now you have scalability on top of that. And by the way, it's just starting. If people downloaded a Lightning Wallet app right now, if they download Wallet of Satoshi or something like that on their phone, you can transact value outside of the existing system around the world in a fraction of a second for pennies on the fractions of pennies. And so now you have a network effect building on top of a protocol that's moving faster and faster and faster because it's providing so much economic value. And right now, most of the world that doesn't know what I just said about Lightning or other stuff, they certainly don't see what's coming next. Fediment, and others that layer three solutions that move the rails of commerce in a new direction that provide a lot of value for society. When we're explaining Bitcoin technically, right, and why this is so much in an environment that they're used to,
Mm-hmm.
it's hard. Most people don't want to go down to the sand of any financial system. They get value from what's on top of
Sure.
the system. So if you look at what you're building your life on top of the existing system that has faulty plumbing, but you don't look at the plumbing until
Mm-hmm.
there's an event that cascades the system where you want to look, where you start to look at the plumbing. That's what's happening today.
Mm-hmm.
Similarly, nobody wants to hear about the plumbing on Bitcoin. And trying to tell them to investigate how deep this is, how profound an impact this is. They don't want to spend the time because their life is too busy on top. But the rails that actually make their lives better, an entire rebuild of the internet is happening on Bitcoin right now, where you have a peer-to-peer distributed internet with money native to it that can't be manipulated. That's what's happening today on Bitcoin. And so Fediment is an example, and what it does is some of these ideas simplify so people won't even talk about Bitcoin later. They won't even know. They won't care. They'll get so much value. But Fediment is almost a shared custody model. So today you have self-custody, which feels really hard because people don't want to trust themselves. They want to trust a bank because we've always done that, even though they know the bank's manipulating the money and it's more risk there. They want to trust somebody else to hold their money. And Bitcoin has a self-custody model at the bottom of it. Because it has a self-custody model at the bottom of it, with that human bias that we want to trust other people, most people don't self-custody. They store it on exchanges, which is high risk. FTX, Coinbase today, all of these exchanges, but tons of their money is held somewhere else.
Yeah.
Believing that somebody's going to protect them when that somebody is actually probably abusing them. These are early solutions, but they're really robust, and they'll take Bitcoin without even knowing is Bitcoin at the base into billions of people because they're so secure and so robust. I remember at Amazon in '99, there were kind of two polar different arguments of fear. One, all stores were going to collapse tomorrow. Where would you buy groceries? And the second one, nobody's going to buy online. Think about what happened. Same world. If you were an executive in Amazon, you saw everything growing and life was good. It was getting better and better and better. And if you were an executive at Sears, it got harder and harder every year.
Yeah.
Describing the exact same world as a transition. And when Sears closed in 2010 or so, nobody cared. Because more of their purchasing
shareholders.
Yeah, exactly. But Sears shareholders did, but virtually the public didn't care. Nobody cared. And so what is happening at a way bigger level than that example, because that's inside the market. This is at a meta level. It is the market. But personally, that's actually what's happening on Bitcoin. If you're in Bitcoin right now, you're choosing that world, and it's getting better and better and better. And anybody, because it's an open network, you can choose before your government chooses. You can front rent the banks, and you're choosing that, and life is getting more and more prosperous for you. To me, the very basis, people should save in Bitcoin as a savings technology. That would be hold it in cold storage, have it as savings technology. From there, so as you start to understand it, and don't just take my word for it, that people should do a lot of research. So that's what they should do at very minimum. As you do that and you start to see this new world, you'll start to say, should I transact in it? And should I start building? And then you might get to where I am today. And all I've done is made a choice. And I've said, I know where the existing world's going, and I'm going to spend more of my time in the world that I want my kids to grow up in. I'm going to start influencing the world that I want. And that's why I'm investing on entrepreneurs building on top of this system. And if you get to start to see that, quite honestly, and it's so hard to actually even convey because most people aren't in that system. I can't believe how exciting it is, and I can't believe more people aren't there. It's so exciting, and it provides a bridge to the other side. So the existing world's going to get more chaotic. As it gets more chaotic, people are going to listen to the news, what's happened to SBV, what happened to Credit Suisse. They're going to listen to all the same people inside that system telling them what's going on, and they're going to make it stronger because they're going to be fearful of the existing system. And all of their work is going to continue to reinforce that system. And some are going to start walking across to a new system, and they're going to build a bridge. And as that bridge gets stronger and stronger, as more and more people walk across, that new system is going to dominate. It's going to take some time to play out, but every single person on the planet has the same choice. Right now, they just don't know they have the choice because they're measuring the system from the system. The monopoly always does a similar thing to protect a monopoly. And why technology is always bottom up from the people furthest away from monopoly is because they're most hurt by the monopoly. So if I looked at people in Africa, why the growth rate on Bitcoin is so strong in Africa is this. Why El Salvador went on is
because
exactly
they don't invest in US stock market.
Exactly. Why? And so it's no different if the monopoly is money. It is no different. It is the same thing. And so we're just talking about so in Costa Rica and what you talked about before, and why can't we win on this type of thing? You can. You actually have an advantage if you stop looking through the monopoly.
You know, as you look forward, is there a quote unquote iPhone moment, a moment where you suddenly have 1 billion plus mainstream users on Bitcoin? What would create that moment?
It's not a moment. It'll be perceived to you as a moment. If you looked at the exponential rate of growth of both Bitcoin on the base layer, holding it as a bearer instrument asset, and the exponential growth of Lightning, then if you saw the innovation that's happening in this space on top of it, it's past that moment. You just don't recognize it. It's way past that moment. Bitcoin might be one of the bigger countries right now. Lightning transactions are hitting all-time highs every single month. If you go look at what Nostr is, just type in GitHub and Nostr and see what that is. Nostr is notes and other things transmitted by relays, and Bitcoin is native to it. It replaces Twitter, it replaces Google, it replaces YouTube, and there's nothing the existing system can do about it, because you can move your information to any client and carry your followers with you. If Bitcoin didn't exist, you couldn't build something like Nostr. But it's really hard to see how these interplay and create more value unless you're that close to that system. So Bitcoin has unlimited velocity and money on layer 2, unlimited. If there wasn't a payment rail that did that on top, like layer 2, then what would happen is people would hold it forever and then create a new fractional reserve system on top of it, just like gold. Essentially, you would create a different group of power people that would create that on top of it. With a payment rail on top of it, you have value exchange inside the same currency unit that is a bearer instrument that can't be manipulated. Let's say we move to a Bitcoin standard and everything's on a Bitcoin standard. You have 10,000 Bitcoin. You have the most Bitcoin. What do you do next? You want to have a standing army to protect it? You're distributing you're distributing your Bitcoin. Well, unless you're creating value for people, you're distributing your Bitcoin. Everything is in service of value. Prices fall to the marginal cost of production. If you're spending on that system, you're distributing your Bitcoin. And if you're producing value for others, you're accumulating Bitcoin. That's what the world is going to move to on this standard. It allows a transition. It allows a transition that nobody realizes happening, just like they don't realize that the credit has to expand in the existing system, and that's what's pushing up the prices. So it allows a transition between systems without a complete collapse of one system. Those transition are, and yes, the people that move early and the people that are seeing that value are going to create way more value in the new system, but it just allows the transition because there is no other way out of pick door 1 or pick door 2. Credit collapse, and everything is counterparty risk to that credit globally, expand credit forever. Centralize every function. There is no free market. Essentially, AI controls you. And who controls AI? There is no other solve from that system. It has to have a transition. All Bitcoin is a transmission mechanism to that system that is outside of anyone's control. It's an open network that every single person on this call can choose to adopt to. Strike, Fedi, there's hundreds of companies. Their idea of how to be able to expand this and make it simpler to use. Strike is one of them. Jack's fantastic. All of these are just different parts of a network hardening and getting more and creating more value.
Because what should we be doing in Costa Rica?
You should be going to Bitcoin as fast as possible. Like
you
literally.
would do it in the Salvador model.
So that was a top-down model. It's not widely used. And it's probably not widely used. It's maybe 5% use rate. In some regions, it's more. It's growing really fast, but it's still early. What it did do is drove massive tourism, massive adoption, and massive inflows of capital to be able to transition. And so, at the very least, each person there should hold some. The faster you move here, the more opportunity you'll see. You can imagine in a system change like this, then I don't think you would want to be stuck in the existing system that's failing, right? With no way out of that system except for watch it slowly fail. And then the only way for you to create, besides tourism, the only way to create exports and everything else is to reduce the value of your labor versus it. How could that ever work to be able to create financial independence? It couldn't. It would take massive leadership to be able to do this at a top-down level, because you would be coming at that against the US, against the entire SWIFT system, against everything else to be able to do that. And all of those things are designed to actually keep the system the way it is. Like if you look at the International Monetary Fund, it actually might be the most, and this is terrible to say, but it might be the most criminal organization because it keeps people in perpetual slavery. And it takes if you look at the actual numbers, Alex Gladstein has done a lot of work on this. If you look at the actual numbers, so you're giving a loan to somebody to revalue the currency and choose which industries, that a lot of that loan gets paid to multinational corporations outside of your country. And then you have to pay back that loan. So it's an extraction of wealth, but people think it's saving them. And the more and more you do those loans inside that existing system, the more and more you're trapped inside that existing system. The point of Bitcoin is you don't have to pay for it anymore. Everyone else is going to pay for it. You don't have to. Choose not to pay for $400 trillion of insolvent debt. At the top-down level, many of the politicians would be inside that system.
What helps make our talent more valuable? And finally, what should our universities be investing in terms of education around the themes that we've been talking about today?
Do more of what we're doing right now. If people did more work on this and got to see what I see and all of the value that's coming, it would be hard not to get really excited about where the world's going. Every single person on the planet actually has that choice, because this is an open monetary network that nobody can stop. I would say right now, most of the education is probably feeding the existing system. And so it would be really hard to see this. And even when I hear blockchain crypto, I hear feeding the existing system. If I'm being honest, that's what I hear. Okay, well, there's a whole bunch of people that care about this topic, and that topic's been conflated by all of the money, and it's not teaching them. It's going exactly the opposite way. It's actually making the existing system stronger and putting them in worse shape. I hate that I said that. If the transition of the system was like this, if it meant that much, if the stakes were that big, you'd probably want to do a super deep dive to make sure you were right. I've tried to disprove my hypothesis. I tried to disprove Bitcoin over and over from every attack vector I could. I did not try to prove it. I constantly try to invalidate it, and I can't.